Hi everyone, Vachas here. I think I finally found myself to come around and give a book review where I really felt I can't really call it a review as well. Honestly, that wouldn't be the right word, but yeah, my thoughts on a book. That makes more sense. I am nobody to review a book, and also I think I'm nobody to review a book that is written by somebody about their own journey. But here we go. I'm here to ask myself why I am so disturbed and unsettled by Paul Kalanithi and his book. Hadn't I read enough about death and disease? Hadn't I lived my own decade of pain, constant reminders of mortality, and the dissonance of being both a person and a patient? So then, what is it about when breath becomes air that gets under my skin? Paul Kalanithi, at 38, after a decade of building a brilliant career as a neurosurgeon and scientist, is diagnosed with an advanced lung cancer. The book opens with him and his wife Lucy navigating the tail end of residency, already an immense test of endurance, commitment, and love. He details cases where surgery itself forces existential questions upon him. What does it mean to be alive when survival is merely biological? And what makes life still worth it when you emerge from the operating table forever altered? Then the tables turn. The doctor becomes the patient, and he has to face the reality of everything he once studied from a clinical distance. The ambiguity of disease, the cruel illusion of control, the ego-stripping vulnerability of being at the mercy of a prognosis, test results, and the arbitrary luck of the body. His frustration is palpable, and I feel it too. He's desperate to know the shape of his remaining time, to quantify the intangible, so he can plan his life around it. I have done that too. In ways I don't even realize I have done that 1,000 times. The passage that strikes me the hardest, his description of physical therapy during treatment. The way he describes something as simple and small as an intravenous infusion, the feeling of the fluid entering his veins, and where he says he could sort of taste that saltiness in his mouth. It is an ordinary medical moment, yet it is written with the depth of someone who now understands how profoundly the body suffers in ways textbooks will never capture. And then there is Lucy. The greatest grief in Paul's story isn't just his own impending death. It is the heartbreaking fact of knowing he has to leave her behind. Or that's what he thinks. He has to leave her behind, which I'm not very fond of using that term, leaving someone behind, because you don't. But still, that's Paul's feeling at that point. That's when the discussion of children comes in. They had always planned to have kids after residency. The conversation around whether to still go through it now, when time is so uncertain, feels like the rawest expression of human hope. They choose IVF. They have their daughter. She is born into a world that will not keep her father for long. Forget long, even for the shortest periods. And yet the grand equation of suffering and love, she is still worth it. When treatment shows signs of working, Paul's instinct is to return to neurosurgery because it was never just a job, it was his calling. And that's the thing about neurosurgery. The thing that gave him meaning. But the cruelty of life lies in the fact that the moment he starts to rebuild, it all begins to slip again. What unsettles me most about this book isn't just Paul's story. It's what it forces me to confront about my own. The exhaustion of uncertainty, the maddening recalibration of purpose when your body dictates the terms of your life. The quiet but persistent grief of knowing that love, no matter how strong, cannot shield anyone from loss. But that's a strong statement. I will probably come back to that. And maybe what really unnerves me the most is what lingers long after I close the book, is the way he is forced to live, or the way he is forced to learn to live just when he's preparing to die. Maybe that's what we're all doing. There is something fundamentally unhealthy, or for the lack of a better word, unpleasant, about Paul Kalanithi's journey midway and close to the end. There is a major element of lamentation and resistance, which ironically felt unscientific. It is a bit of a dichotomy. From what I've heard from friends in neurosurgery, the satisfaction in that field isn't necessarily in the treatment itself, but in the craft, the sheer art of it. The restoration of a patient's quality of life after neurosurgery is difficult to articulate, but that's where the fulfillment lies. And yet Paul, the surgeon, the scientist, found himself wrestling with his prognosis in a way that felt like resistance rather than adaptation. Wanting to have a child, wanting to return to work, wanting to push forward. But to what extent is not giving up a rational response? I'll just repeat it. But to what extent is not giving up a rational response? And at what point does it slip into denial and lament? I understand that Paul wouldn't have been who he was without that relentless drive, that absolute commitment to medicine, the classic overachiever's instinct to push forward no matter what. So who am I to critique this? No one. And guess what? I am not critiquing it. I would never dare to review a book that is someone's personal account of their own life, their own pain, their own end. So what am I doing? I am thinking aloud. I am placing this experience next to my own decade-long struggle with refractory lupus nephritis. I'm trying to understand why his story unsettles me, why it leaves me agitated. And I think I've figured out why. It's the friction of opposing the inevitable, the energy and time lost in resisting what cannot be changed. And by the time surrender happens, if it ever does, that is, it's too late. That's what makes me sad. That's what upsets me. Dear Dr. Paul, how I wish you had played along with the prognosis just enough not to let it limit you, but to free you from the pain of pushing against something immovable. Or maybe you did. Maybe I'm projecting my own fears onto you. But I need to put it out there. We often talk about the spiritual closure we leave for others when we go. But how key is it to find our own closure? Maybe you did. Maybe I'm just trying to figure out what mine would be if it ever were to happen soon. Just a thought. Well, that's the end of my thought and about the book When Breath Becomes Air. Thank you for giving it a listen. Would love to hear your experience reading the book, or just about what you think about my thoughts. And I started the Kochi Book Reading Club when I was trying to deal with my illness on a more mental, intellectual level, when there was an existential pain that was amplified, that came along with battling this sort of illnesses. So and when I see the community for what it is now, it makes me so happy. And I hope we can continue building on this. And see you every Saturday, 4:30 to 6:30 at Cafe Coffee Day, Kalur. Bye-bye.